You've often heard me discuss the importance of mixing up your play in order to remain unpredictable. One of the ways which you can do that is by sometimes betting the flop and sometimes going for a check raise. When deciding which play makes the most sense, there are several factors to consider. Number one, the strength of your own hand. The most important factor in deciding whether or not you should bet the flop or look for a check raise is the strength of your hand and the likelihood that the next card could cause you to lose it. As a rule, the more vulnerable your hand is to get outdrawn, the more you should lean towards betting rather than risking a check raise that doesn't work out because your opponent didn't bet the flop. So, for example, if you held pocket kings and the flop was king 8-3 rainbow, well, there'd be little risk of being outdrawn on the next card, so checking would be the perfect play. However, if you had those same kings, but this time the flop was 9 of diamonds, 10 of diamonds, and a 3, you should consider betting the flop, as that's a dangerous board for your hand. Your opponent could have a flush draw, straight draw, or even a hand like ace-10 would have 5 outs to beat your hand. 2, your opponent's behavior. If you're planning to check raise an opponent, you have to first be able to gauge the likelihood that he's going to bet the flop. Timid players won't bet unless they have a strong hand, which in most cases means that you really wouldn't want to check raise them anyway, unless of course you had a monster yourself. Aggressive players, though, look to attack pots and pounce on weakness, so you should check raise them often to neutralize their aggressive play. Number 3, past history with opponents. Having a good memory of past hands is a great asset at the poker table. You can tap into that memory to help you decide how to proceed with a hand. For example, if your opponent has picked up on a pattern that you seem to check raise with a strong hand but bet right out with weaker hands, well, then you might consider throwing a curveball by doing the opposite of what your opponent expects. Of course, your opponent may expect you to do the opposite, so you might even want to play it straightforward. That's the beauty of poker. It's kind of like rock, scissors, paper in that regard. I mean, if you go rock 3 times in a row, doing it a 4th time may fool your opponent into thinking, well, he wouldn't go rock again, would he? Number 4, your stack size. If you get to the point where you don't have many chips in front of you, you might as well be the one to bet the flop rather than check raise, because you might not even have enough chips to raise your opponent's bet if he does bet. The only time you would go for the check raise then is when you have a monster hand and think your opponent might bet as a bluff, but likely wouldn't call your bet. Not only is your stack size a consideration, but so is the size of your opponents in this hand. If they are short stacked and almost all in, going for a big payday with a check raise has much less value. Number 5 is your position at the table as well as the number of players in the pot. This is an extremely important consideration when deciding to slow play a hand on the flop when you're looking for a check raise. Obviously, the more players to act behind, the more likely it is that one of those players is going to bet. So, if you were in the small blind sitting there with a monster hand and 5 players in the hand behind you, checking is a fine play because there's an excellent chance that one of those players is going to take a stab at the pot. However, if you had that monster hand in the same situation, but only this time you were the second last player to act, going for a check raise would be extremely risky. You would have to have reason to believe that the last player will definitely bet. Otherwise, all of your opponents will get a free shot to beat you on the next card.